social media is bad for kids? Well, so does Elon Musk. The former CEO of X is encouraging limits for certain users on social media. Musk gave a word of advice during an interview at Viva Technology, an annual technology conference dedicated to innovation and startups held in Paris, France, that is taking place this week. He encouraged parents to limit their children's social media use, especially in the age of artificial intelligence.
I would urge parents to limit the amount of social media that children are able to see, because they're being programmed by a dopamine maximizing AI.
So you understand that Elon is ready to sacrifice X to XAI.
Musk posted on X yesterday, "A lot of social media is bad for kids as there is extreme competition between social media AIs rather, to maximize dopamine." So what do you think about this, Jessica? There's also a best-selling book that came out from the social researcher Jonathan Haidt, where he tackles some of the harms that social media can do to kids. And yet more kids than ever seem to be on social media. They seem to have more access to the internet, especially through phones. It doesn't seem like this screen time is doing a whole lot of good for their mental health.
Very scary. It's a tough decision as a parent because it is social, right? Are you going to cut off your kids from the ability to communicate with everyone else in their school and beyond, which is a little bit scary. We were always told don't summon strangers from the internet when the internet was very new and social media was very new. And now that's like a large part of how young people use the internet. Are you going to cut them off from that entire world? And maybe it pays off in the future because they are more mentally healthy than their peers who were using social media and the internet on a regular basis. You know, it's a huge trade-off there. You could potentially, cut your kid off from developing socially, or, really benefit their ability to pay attention to things for more than 15 seconds, which parents have noted in their own kids. They're seeing very short attention spans when they're using apps like TikTok and watching things on YouTube that they can't sit down and enjoy a 2-hour movie because they get bored, that they're not getting new and different content. It's a little bit scary to think that a developing brain is being shaped by that dopamine maxing. Like Elon Musk said, I do think that the over-reliance on AI, there's going to be some pulling back. We saw recently, this past week, Twitter sort of blew up, or X rather, with people posting how horrible Google's AI feature is with giving useful results. Someone asked how to make a pizza sauce that isn't super watery, and the advice from Google AI was to add Elmer's glue or a non-toxic glue to increase the tackiness. Another one said that chicken should be cooked at 102 degrees. Obviously, that's not food safe, so it needs some work.
Yeah, clearly, that's obviously hilarious, but also concerning, considering how many big companies are now relying on AI for a lot of its production. Going back to the question of kids and phones and social media, I mean, this is something that I think about a lot. I obviously just got married. God willing, we'll hopefully start a family soon, and I'll have some time before my kids start asking for phones, but not that much. And just doing a lot of research on this, some of the things that I've learned are very, very concerning. The attention span is definitely one of them. If you talk to teachers nowadays, they say that having phones in school is one of the worst things that has happened to a child's education. They are not able to pay attention long enough to read a full chapter of a book. They're basically on their phones all day long, even when school policy says that they're not supposed to be. They usually end up getting away with it, if not in part because teachers and administrators can't put their own phones away. All of us pretty much are addicted to our screens. The numbers about mental health are really concerning as well in terms of the anxiety that kids report by having access to screens and internet all day long. And they've also reported upticks in bullying, cyberbullying, because of social media. And so all of these things are really troubling to me, and definitely puts me more in the camp of trying to keep phones out of kids' hands for as long as possible. But obviously this is a parental choice that has to be made, and I just encourage parents to look into some of the studies that have come out there was a school recently in Massachusetts, I believe, that bought these pouches that block the cell phone signals. And at the beginning of the school day, every student has to go and put their phone in these pouches. And the effects of this were incredible because at first, obviously, the students were really upset that their school was doing this. They had increased anxiety, they claimed, because of not being able to access their phone all day. The parents were upset that they weren't able to text their kids all day. But after about a week of this, they started reporting that they had developed much more fruitful and rich relationships with their peers in school, that they could pay attention more in class, and they started to be happier without the phones. And actually, at the end of the day, when they went to collect their phone from the pouch, felt a little bit of dread at turning it on and being connected again. And I thought that was a really fascinating study as to even the great effects of a short-term detox from phone access and social media and the really positive effect that that can have on our youth.
Yeah, I would love to look at a study that showed how, the boomers use social media. It seems that they've used it to connect with old friends through Facebook and unfortunately get news, which isn't always good information on the Meta apps. But then we look at, some of the younger generations, older millennials, and how they're using social media. And, the zillennials kind of in between. I feel like I'm in that category because I grew up without the social media. Through middle school, people started using Facebook, but Instagram really took off. When I was in high school, we used it, I think, differently than how we're seeing, Generation Z use it, the younger Gen Z kids. Because when you're going to school every day and you're seeing your peers in person, it's a little bit more difficult to front on social media, which many people do, doing it for the gram, posting edited photos, posting, only the best photos of yourself. I think there's a good trend coming from the younger generation. I think it's because they see their peers every day in person, so they can make that comparison immediately. They're being a little bit more real on social media. They're on it a lot. And they have an understanding of like what TikTok filters do, what makeup does. And a lot of them are posting, on their worst days and their best days equally, which I think is a little bit healthier than trying to put, a version of yourself that isn't very real on social media, which we see among the millennials. I would love to just survey, how do you use social media? What do you use it for across different age groups? Because I think we get very different results. And now that we're in a space where it's not just social media, it's also entertainment, I think the dopamine maxing is a different problem in that sense than just the comparison across, you and your peers.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see the differences in how they use it. And it is definitely the case that sometimes parents are, in fact, the roadblock to limiting social media access or phone access in general for their kids, as opposed to it being more of a kid-centric decision. Because what these teachers report is that the parents get really angry when they try to take away phones in school because they want this constant connection to their child. And they claim that it's because they need to get access to them in case of an emergency. But I mean, even just when I was in school, however many years ago, it wasn't that long ago, we had, I guess, basic cell phones by the time I was in middle school. But if we had a situation where a practice was canceled or there was some situation with a ride, we would just coordinate with a friend's mom to give us a ride home, or we would sit at the library and wait until our parents could come pick us up. Like somehow we always managed to figure out these situations without constantly having a screen in front of us where we could communicate with our parents constantly. And I think that was actually good for our critical thinking skills and our ability to be independent and not always be connected to a parent. What Jonathan Haidt talks about in his book, which I think is really interesting, is that we give kids a whole lot of independence on the internet, but not so much in real life. There's this real protectionist, safetyist aspect to parenting nowadays where kids don't just leave the house and run around in the woods for the whole day and then come home at dinner time. But on the internet, it's sort of like the wild, wild west. And that dichotomy can be really damaging because, yeah, you're protecting your kids physically maybe because they're not going outside as much. They're not engaging in maybe external risky behavior. But psychologically, they've become very sheltered. And that's a huge problem for raising healthy and independent kids.
Totally. Yeah, I can imagine a kid going out and playing it. It's exactly as you said, the difference between physical and maybe you want to call it psychological, emotional, mental safety. You could see something on the internet that changes your worldview for life, that traumatizes you. You can go out and play, and yeah, maybe you fall out of a tree, you break your arm because you're kids and you're playing and you're being stupid. Worse things can happen, of course. But I think viewing psychological trauma and the impact of what can be seen on the internet and the impact of information or watching a video that's really traumatizing, it can be even more severe than getting hurt playing outside. And we've seen trends, throughout history where parents have been called negligent for letting their kids at young ages play outside because they're not being supervised. I think to criminalize that parenting decision was definitely wrong. But we're in a place where cities are seen as unsafe places. I remember from a young age, I was taught that I should be aware of kidnappers. And that's really scary that, yes, parents worry about that, but that there aren't safe places for kids to go play outside. And at this point, is the risk the same of what they see online versus what they could encounter just playing in a neighborhood?
Yeah, that's a good point. I saw a really terrifying study recently that showed the average age at which people are first exposed to pornography has decreased dramatically over the past 5 to 10 years, to the point where people are on average encountering pornography for the first time around age 9 to 11, which is something that would absolutely traumatize someone and really mess up their view of sex and relationships for their entire life. It's really scary to think about that, and hopefully makes us all wonder what our policy is going to be for our kids, either now or in the future, and how we want to make sure that we're protecting them not just from external physical threats, but potentially threats that might come from their screen as well. That's going to do it for us today on Rising. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss any content. And for those of you who like to listen while on the go, we are now available anywhere you listen to podcasts.
Bye, y'all.